It is the last day of the Ontario PC Convention, and on Saturday night, Patrick Brown gave his speech. It was the keynote address?
It was.
All in's the theme. Tell me about that.
Well, the party, we're all in. We're all in that we need change in Ontario and that we're not going to cede any ground. We're not going to cede any riding. We're not going to avoid talking about any subject. We're all in to make sure that we have a majority progressive conservative government in the next election.
What does it mean when you say you're not going to leave any ridings untouched? Did the party in the past say, well, that riding over there's a write-off?
There was a history where there was target ridings where parts of the province simply were not visited. We skipped the Northern Leaders debate in the last provincial election. I'm not going to skip any parts of the province. I want to make sure that we run full, energized, fully funded campaigns in every single riding in this province.
I liked when you were talking about that doesn't matter where you're from, who you are, you've got a home in this party. I think that's an important message today. Do you think that wasn't the case before with the party, or are you trying to change perceptions that your opponents put on you?
Yeah, well, and part of it is the branding that the political opponents did, but the reality is the PC party a year and a half ago was 10,000 party members. Today it's 80,000. We are disproportionately young today. We're disproportionately diverse. If you look at some of the commentary about this convention, is that it looks like a very different crowd. The reality is we've been reaching out to nurses associations, to doctors, to correctional officers, to firefighters, police officers, and saying, you may not have felt comfortable before, come home. Be part of the progressive conservative family.
The speech last night, you mentioned taxes 8 times. You said that taxes were too high, but you didn't talk about cutting taxes. In fact, the only policy that I saw that you didn't flesh out any, but that you gave the most thought to was putting a price on carbon. Why?
Well, let me say this is the issue of the day. This is what we have First Minister's meeting on it. There's legislation coming at Queen's Park. We had an extensive caucus a meeting about this, and we believe we need a conservative approach to the environment, where the Liberals want to create a Liberal slush fund. And my response is that the cap and trade policy should be tax relief. It should be a dividend to taxpayers in the form of broad-based tax relief. And let me say, it is not a tax if the government doesn't use it. It is not a tax if the government returns it to taxpayers.
Have you seen a revenue-neutral carbon tax ever? Because I haven't seen them. British Columbia didn't work. They tend to be very, very good for governments, and they end up being cash grabs. Well,
we hope to be the first progressive conservative government, the first conservative government that will actually create a revenue-neutral cap and trade.
But why putting a price on carbon? I was looking at the actual carbon emissions. I mean, I could look at reports like from John Fife at the University of Victoria, who agrees with the UN in saying, you know what, global warming slowed down, we're in a hiatus. But if you just look at emissions, Ontario was actually well below 1990 levels. Getting rid of the coal plants, losing a lot of manufacturing jobs. Ontario's more than met what the Kyoto commitment was. Why is this still a big issue?
Well, unfortunately, Ontario is meeting those targets not for good reasons. It's because we've lost 350,000 manufacturing jobs. And I would note that the phase-out of coal was started by a progressive conservative premier, Ernie Eves. I believe climate change is a threat, and it's something that our generation needs to confront. I don't want us to be conservatives shying away to talk about the environment. I don't believe there's a contradiction in believing in conservatism and conservation.
Okay, but I'm just trying to figure out why a carbon tax, or like what would you be looking at if you were designing it?
If you look at Ronald Reagan, when he had the acid rain treaty, the conservative approach was that polluters pay and that it's returned in tax relief. That's my approach. Polluters will pay, but it's returned in tax relief. Our approach to cap and trade, which is coming to Ontario, like it or not. I believe the Liberals are taking the wrong approach, and simply it's a cash grab, it's a slush fund. But our approach to this is, rather than it being a cash grab for government and creating larger, bigger government, it should be returned to Ontarians in terms of a dividend to taxpayers, relief, broad-based tax relief for individuals and businesses.
The related issue, pipeline. It's normally not a provincial issue. Pipelines that go across provincial boundaries, the feds take care of that. But now we've got provinces all trying to get a piece of the action or demands. If you were Premier, how do you think the current Premier, or how would you deal with this issue?
I believe we should support the pipeline. It's in the national interest.
Okay. The going forward for Ontario, third biggest budget item is the debt, $1 billion a month.
$308 billion in debt. It is astronomical.
So how would you tackle that? I mean, people will say, you're conservatives, you're going to slash everything. How would you deal with the fact that we're paying $1 billion a month in interest in the debt, and the Ontario taxpayer is likely tapped out, especially with this Ontario registered pension plan, which is not about pensions, it's about another pool of cash for Kathleen Wynne to build infrastructure.
Which, by the way, will kill 54,000 jobs. It could cost as much as $1,643 in new taxes.
Would you move forward with that, with the pension plan?
Absolutely not. I think we should refund it and repeal it. It is a bad proposal for Ontario. It is the absolute worst time for a new gigantic tax grab. In terms of where we could make Ontario more efficient, let me share with you some examples, because we do have a huge problem. $1 billion interest payment to foreign creditors is not acceptable. Look at healthcare. We had a report recently by the Auditor General that in home care, we spend 39% of the home care budget on administration. We spend far too much on administration, far too much on bureaucracy. We're concerned about hospitals crumbling. We'll put money into the front lines, not into administration. You ask me you try to find one nurse or doctor who supports the LHINs, and they say it's just a buffer for the government. The government has invested in administration at the expense of the front lines.
Would you look at doing away with the LHINs?
That is absolutely something that I would look at. We have encouraged that conversation at Queen's Park, saying that we can't continue. We can't continue at creating more and more healthcare bureaucracy, because what it results in is it crowds out the fiscal capacity for the government to actually support the real delivery of healthcare. Let me raise something else in terms of the revenue problem the government has. The Conference Board of Canada says that we lose $3.7 billion in revenue for the government for jobs that aren't filled here. No one's willing to have the conversation that our education system is broken. We are graduating young people for jobs that existed 20 years ago, not the jobs of today. Why don't we have the conversation about bringing coding into the schools, enhanced computer literacy, mandatory financial literacy in the schools? Instead, we graduated 9,000 teachers last year for 5,000 teaching positions. We have students coming out of school with student debts for a job that will never exist, and government is doing that, and frankly, it's unethical.
Well, that must get them some revenue, though. They're taking the money.
It is unethical to young people to create an education system, to subsidize those. First of all, they're subsidizing those degrees, having students come with student debts, knowing full well there's no job at the end of the road. The Conference Board of Canada is right. The skills gap in Ontario is atrocious. 52% of infrastructure and engineering firms in Ontario had to look outside of Ontario because there weren't the students here with the qualifications for those jobs. I want to train those young people in Ontario.
So are we losing out on jobs as well? Are jobs relocating to other jurisdictions?
It's one of there's a number of reasons why we're seeing businesses leave Ontario, whether it's a high tax, whether it's red tape, whether it is the environment we have in Ontario today that's hostile to investment. But one of the reasons is the skill shortage. I've heard that from businesses, and we have to confront that challenge in Ontario. What I want to see us talk about in provincial politics is linking education to the market today, to market opportunities, to employment opportunities. The notion that we don't even pay attention to that is unbelievable.
Let me ask you about turning around the economy. Ontario used to be a major manufacturing hub for the whole country, and you referenced the 350,000 jobs. I've been listening to politicians for almost 20 years tell me that we've got to move to a knowledge-based economy and away from manufacturing, but not everyone's going to work in a knowledge-based economy. Do you have a commitment to manufacturing in Ontario? Should Ontario still be a place where people make things?
Absolutely. I don't want to give up on the manufacturing sector. If you listen to some of the complaints from those in the manufacturing world, you know what they're saying? They're saying universally that the ORPP, this payroll tax, will kill jobs. It will drive manufacturing away. When GM is saying they're going to the States and they're not going to, potentially be in Ontario after 2017, one of the reasons is because of policies like the payroll tax. One of the reasons is because we have the fastest growing electricity prices in North America. We can keep manufacturing. We can grow manufacturing if we actually have an environment that says we want business in Ontario. Instead, we have a situation today where Manitoba, Quebec, New York, and Michigan are running economic development departments in Ontario, poaching our jobs. You know why? Because it's more affordable to do business elsewhere.
Patrick Brown, thank you very much.
My pleasure.